Just because you added an AI feature does not mean it has value for your customers. A lot of these AI features I've tried in products, it's like, yeah, it's interesting. It only works about 50% of the time. And now you're going to charge me more for this thing that works 50% of the time? As soon as I put a monetization gate in front of it, that's going to stop my adoption flywheel.
Welcome to SaaS That App, building B2B web applications. The podcast where we share real-world stories, practical advice, and tech insights for those building or thinking about starting a tech-enabled business. I'm your co-host, Aaron Marchbanks.
And I'm Justin Edwards. Each week we bring you the stories, strategies, and insights you need to build your SaaS or tech-enabled business smarter, not harder. Let's dive right in.
Hello and welcome back to SaaS That App. As always, I am your co-host, Aaron Marchbanks, and with me today, as almost always, either here or here, usually, is Justin Edwards, my partner in crime. How's it going, Justin?
Hey, never better. Had a somewhat eventful weekend, as you may have picked up on if you saw the news, but all in all, not doing too bad.
Yes, Justin is hanging out south of the border where there has been things going on. So, but happy to report safe, safe and sound. But yes, and finishing up the house, right?
Yeah, the house is basically done. This is not a virtual background. This is actually my mess. So that's exciting. Yeah.
I noticed that as well. It's like, that's great. Things got to start feeling a little bit more settled with that. Also with us today, our guest is Dan Balcauski, founder of Product Tranquility, where he helps B2B SaaS companies design pricing and packaging strategies that actually reflect the value of what it is they're delivering instead of just guessing or doing what other competitors are doing or just, going with the gut, charging what feels right. So Dan has spent most of his career kind of at the intersection point of product and strategy and growth, worked across startups, large organizations, led a lot of product initiatives and dealing firsthand with what we're going to be getting into today, which is one of the hardest problems in software. And that is how to price something in a meaningful, kind of tangible way that's fair and or scalable and or aligned with businesses and models that you're trying to build. So through Product Tranquility, he partners with SaaS founders, and that's kind of how he gets them across the line. So if you've ever launched a feature, had no idea what to charge for it, underpriced it because you're afraid of losing deals, looked at your pricing page and thought, this is probably not the best way to go about it. We're going to get into all that today. So Dan, welcome to the pod.
Thanks for having me. It's good to be here.
Absolutely. So first things first, what pulled you in the direction of technology? Was this something that was like goal for years from the get-go? Did you fall into it? Did you get in there sideways? How did you get here?
Yeah, I've been in the tech space my entire career, probably going back to high school. I'm a nerd, so really did well at math and science and those type of things, and took my first programming classes in high school and decided to go and get a computer engineering undergrad. So started out my career as engineer and then moved into product, got an MBA along the way, and been running my consulting firm for a little over 6 years now, which is kind of wild to say. And now I have the privilege of helping founders, CEOs, and their teams define pricing and packaging that helps them turn pricing from a strategic liability into a core strategic asset.
So at what point along the journey there did you decide this is going to be the focus? Pricing is a problem. Packaging is a problem. I want to attack that.
Yeah, that's an interesting blend, right? I think like any good career, it's a blend of luck, experience / wisdom. Wisdom is what you get when you get experiences you don't want. And then some natural inclination or talent. As I mentioned, I'm a nerd. So I think my preconception before I got into pricing explicitly was pricing's very analytical, very data driven. And there are pricing worlds that are like that. And we may get into what it looks like in B2B SaaS or elsewhere. In B2B SaaS, there's definitely analytics to it, but it also is a significant blend of psychology and understanding. And we think about idea like customers' willingness to pay for something. Willingness to pay is a measure of desire or motivation. It's similar to measuring happiness. And so it has a lot of interesting principles of consumer psychology that you have to understand. And then, so it blends a lot of interests and then, happenstance along the way.
For sure. So you've worked in companies, obviously, before becoming, a pricing wizard, the wisdom part of that, right? So when you get into, and I'm assuming there are many places where your line of work and our line of work kind of cross over. You have to almost become a subject matter expert with the people that you're helping, so that you can understand, their market, their customers, and things like that. But when you're on the inside, when you're getting in here, how do you help founders approach pricing? When you get in, what are the places, the specific elements that you look at that deserve attention, that kind of drive what it is that you want to get them to see?
Yeah, well, I think maybe first is helping them with a misconception that is pretty rampant when folks think about pricing. When it comes to SaaS pricing, most executives think that what you charge determines your success. In fact, who and how you charge determines your success. So unpack that a little bit. That first part, people think about what you charge. A lot of the initial preconceptions are all around what's the number. We're charging for this product. Should it be $19 a seat, or should it be $99 a seat? Or should our prices end in 5s or 9s? Those are all super interesting questions, but they tend not to be the biggest leverage points. So, in this conversation, I may say pricing, but I'm always talking about pricing and packaging. And so that really gets into that second part of who and how. So I kind of hinted at this before, thinking about willingness to pay. It's a measure of desire or motivation. That often comes from a particular customer or group of customers, what we call a segment, their specific situations, their motivations, their current constraints define that level of desire or motivation. And then how we charge, breaking packaging down into its different elements, like the price metric, the unit of value you charge customers for. Are you charging per seat or per number of contacts in your database or number of pipelines in your CRM, right? It could be any number of things. Or the pricing models, it's subscription, perpetual, pay as you go, some sort of hybrid of those. What are the offer configurations or bundles that you're putting into the market, such that your differentiated value as you graduate between, for example, tiers? A lot of companies in the B2B SaaS world use good, better, best, that's clear and consumable by your customer, right? Because you might have, for a mature, even semi-mature software product, you could enumerate a couple hundred features, right? And so if we tried to sell those as a Chinese menu of features, first of all, your salespeople aren't going to be able to explain it. Your customers or prospects not going to be able to understand it. So we need to put those together into bundles or offers that are coherent, that solve distinct use cases, that are easy to communicate, right? But so a lot of the work goes into that packaging aspect. And of course, at the end of it, we need to put a price point on something, but it's really at the tail end, and it's usually no more than, I would say, at most 5% of any given pricing exercise is really figuring out what that number is after the back end of all that work.
So if you wanted to be a little data driven about this, and you are launching a relatively new product, maybe you have a couple customers who you knew personally, who became customers kind of through your connection with them, and now you're trying to develop a pricing that works to address the market, more generally, and to go find people who aren't coming to you from word of mouth or through connections. What are the things that you coach people to look at to start developing a sense of segmentation, if we're going to do good, better, best, or maybe there's certain modules that people need and other people don't? What's the way to engage with that initially?
Yeah, it really depends on, when you say to bring in a new product, right? I could take that kind of from two ways. There's the early stage company where they don't have anything in market, which might be very different than if you're already in market and you have a portfolio already, and now you're adding an additional product, right? Your understanding of customers and dynamics and what they've been asking for in those two cases might be very different. I would say the latter case, you're going to have a much stronger hypothesis of what is going to satisfy customers. The early stage company, right? Anybody going through a Y Combinator program or anything else, right? It's like you're starting from zero. We got this idea. We think it might be valuable. Now we got to go talk to 100 people net new to go figure out, is this something that they're struggling with and is a problem that they need to have solved? There's a couple of different assumptions buried in your question. I would say, when you're at the earliest point in your development, so I'll start with the new company because it's the cleanest sheet of paper. I see a lot of companies that maybe try to innovate in areas that don't require innovation off the bat. Is that really required for market success for you to have that? And so when you think about something like good, better, best, it's a really nice starting point. It's not the best solution for every single scenario, but it has a lot of things going for it. It relies on a lot of tried and true methods of consumer psychology and choice architecture. It's relatable for your customers, right? So even going back to something like price metric, if I'm creating a new CRM, well, who's the absolute market leader in that space? The Salesforce. What does Salesforce use for a price metric? The number of seats. If I come with a new product and I'm like, well, I'm not going to charge you by number of seats. I'm going to charge you by the number of, I don't know, the number of, I don't know, tokens our AI uses on the back end to help your sales team. You're just put yourself in an uphill battle, right? It's very similar, not the same, but has similar characteristics to if you're, there's a lot of buzz about this back in the day when people were like, oh, you have to create a new category. It was like, yes, there's companies that do create a new category and it worked out very well for them, but they're few and far between. And there's many, many successful companies that did not create a new category because creating a new category is hard because every time you're like trying to create something in the frame of mind of an entire market, it's very expensive and difficult for them to reference versus they're like, hey, we're a CRM, we charge by seat. Now we can talk about a differentiated value proposition. This is how we're different. So like, that's a long-winded way of saying, like, don't be afraid, especially at the early stage of, this is not copy your competitors, but not trying to out-innovate yourself and be too clever such that you put yourself in a bad position. I would say early stage as well, there's, really a question or a decision to make around price positioning. It's kind of rarely talked about, but at the earliest stages, like, well, what kind of company are you trying to be? I think that maybe the most relatable example to this is, okay, I'm going to be a watch company. Am I going to be a Timex or a Rolex? Because that has very downstream implications on the rest of my company and go-to-market model and marketing and position, how we talk about it, what our approach is to sales, right? Is it very high touch? Is it very bespoke concierge because our, a single sale supports all that activity, or does it have to be highly transactional in volume? And that's a decision. You're not going to come at that analytically. I mean, potentially you have some amount of analysis that says like, this is what this looks like, but that's really sort of a decision point. Are you going to be a luxury brand? Are you going to be a value brand? Are you going to be maybe somewhere in the middle? And then, at those earliest stages, I say all what I said before around don't out clever yourself, because those earliest product launches and maybe the first 1-2 years after launch, it's really about, does this product actually create value? Does it solve the problem we say it solves? It's such that we have validated feedback. Of course, you want to have people paying for that, but you're very rarely is your problem, oh, we don't have the optimal pricing and packaging, right? You could really screw that up by being too clever, but you want to validate that. Because if you think about any product launch, all products have a set of hypotheses. You build something, it doesn't mean it's actually going to solve the problem. It's going to work for customers. Maybe you solved it and realized it wasn't. We sometimes use the term vitamin versus aspirin. No, this is more of a vitamin than an aspirin. Price can give you some of those signals, but my sense is that like your product alone is going to give you some of those signals, and so you don't want price to get in the way with it, which is very different than maybe you get to 5 million or 10 million of ARR, and now you're like, okay, the product's getting complex enough. We've established a differentiated value proposition. We know enough about our customer base, and now it's time to kind of go back and rigorously approach this at that point.
Real quick, this episode is brought to you by Delta Systems, which is what Aaron and I do when we're not talking through microphones to you, the people of the internet. We've got a really, really great software team here, and we love to work with cool people on cool projects. So if that sounds like you and you've got a problem or you're in some kind of a jam, go to deltasystems.com, grab a time with us. We can beat up on your problem together, and if there's a fit there, amazing, we'll help you out. So deltasystems.com, grab an appointment, and hey, maybe we can work together. So what are like the signals that you look for when you have some customers and you're kind of trying to take your different customers, maybe you're doing segmenting or seeing maybe there's different types of customers that are, they're segmenting, but not necessarily by size, and saying like, I guess, what is your strategy if you work with a company that's rethinking their pricing and they have a bunch of customers? How do you go about trying to tease signal out of what pricing might work better?
Yeah, so there's a couple of different ways you can look at this. I would say transactional analysis, like the data that you have in your general ledger or CRM, that can be helpful, but probably not as helpful as most people think it is. What do I mean by that? Like, usually we'll go in and we will look at the transactional data, for example, to see, do they have a discounting policy? Is that discounting policy enforced? Those are two different questions, by the way. Those don't always happen together. And then what is the sort of that dispersion, right? And so you can potentially see pricing problems in the dispersion of discounts as it relates to potentially different customer groups. So for example, what can happen may be helpful, very tactically, is we have a use case. I see this quite often, actually. We have a use case that is split across tiers. So say we have a simple two tier. We've got a good and a best. We don't have a better, right? But there's one of those use cases is split between. And so you see customers who, to solve their problem, really need to buy the best, but have no need whatsoever for all the other stuff the best comes with.
Yes.
And so what you'll see there is you see that they got sold the best, but they got a really significant set of discounts. And that points to a problem of, hey, like, our use cases should be coherent within a package. Like, if we're straddling use cases, you're going to end up having a lot of, imagine what that looks like in real time in the sale, right? It's like, okay, we got the sale, but how many extra calls with sales and negotiation rounds did that have to go to close that sale versus like, oh yeah, Justin, you got this problem. This package is the one for you. Oh yeah, that does everything I need. Great. Here, send me the PO or et cetera. We'll get the contract signed.
I'm living this problem right now. So I have trying to figure out pricing for a company that I'm working with. And we have one customer who's a large customer and they're very, very happy with their package and happy to pay for it. And then I have another customer who's a lot smaller and really wants a couple things out of the better or best tier, but just can't actually afford that tier for the size that they are, but really need a couple things from that. So we ended up basically discounting them down because of their size. But I'm trying to I think that you're right. I think it points to a problem with how we're packaging this.
Yeah. And so, that's a problem that I don't say there's any perfect solution. There's always, segmentation as a approach always has, somewhat fuzzy boundaries. So, but definitely that could be a way to, get at that. But in general, right, when you're looking at pricing, especially you're looking at transactional data through a pricing lens, trying to figure out what to do, it's much like looking at your company strategy through last year's P&L. Like, that's what happened. That doesn't tell you what you should do. Like, unless it's glaringly obvious of like, hey, like we keep on, punching ourselves in the face, we should stop doing that. The P&L, right? If you have another dimension you can look at, for example, is like your win rate or close rate, and what your pushback is on deals that you don't close. If nobody is complaining about your pricing whatsoever, you lose no deals to pricing. Hey, well, we got a fantastic win rate. Well, that's probably a problem. It probably means you're way underpriced. If anybody's sold services before, having talking to a prospect, you're like, yeah, this will be $1 million. They're like, oh, great, send me this thing today. You're like, oh no, this person probably would have bought. This person probably would have bought for 10, and now I don't know that. So that is a sort of a dog that didn't bark type signal that you could look for. But going back, kind of, so the transactional analysis helps for some remediation issues. Churn customers are also very helpful. If you could do win loss on the front end, and then also retention studies on the back end, that can give you signal. Then looking at deeper levels of what you might call kind of unobservable characteristics. So we're really getting into a segmentation approach. I think one problem that many companies run into is they think about segmentation and they infer that, oh, well, our sales team is divided into an enterprise and commercial segment. So that's our customer segmentation. But remember what I said before about willingness to pay. Like, willingness to pay arises from the situation, the context that you're in. I don't know any. So say you're selling MarTech software. I don't know a Fortune 500 CMO that wakes up in the morning and says, I am a Fortune 500 CMO. What software do I want to buy today? It's like, no, that person has got some very specific problems that they're dealing with in their organization. And usually what we see when we go and do the deeper level segmentation work is that the Fortune 500 CMO maybe also looks very much like a mid-market CMO, right? But there's other characteristics, there's situations, motivations, behaviors, workforce compositions that are more telling, that help you define what those are, that then propagate into, okay, what are the use cases, what are the pain points those people need to solve? So you start from that bottoms up of what is the problem they're trying to solve into the capabilities that your platform has to coherently package them together to create an offering for that kind of person who's in that situation.
I want to jump into, as we spent some time talking about, I'm going to say startups or early stage or these are good points to be thinking about. I want to jump to a mature company now. So someone who's been in business for a while, maybe it's a very, I'm going to call it a broad type of approach to pricing. That's like a license model. It's just like a per use, like, here's this thing, you pay an annual fee or a monthly fee for the licensing of it or something like that. And they find themselves at a point of segmentation or at a point where they need to maybe fork their product and therefore change their pricing model. How do you help them, first of all, identify if that is something that they do in fact need to do? And two, if they do need to change that model and maybe fork their product or whatever, how do you help them change that from like maybe a license to a per use or a per seat or per, like you said, token, something like that. That's a departure from what they have done for years and years with their customers.
So these are often challenging because in existing business, the benefit of the incumbent is they've got money. The downside or weakness of an incumbent is they've got a lot of money that they don't want to lose. And so going through one of these transitions can be risky and painful, et cetera. So there's a bunch of like sub questions embedded in yours. So I'll just take.
Sorry, I do that sometimes.
All right, I'll just take like a price metric transition because I think this is one that is most impactful for companies. It can be difficult and painful, but it's often worth the bite at the apple to figure it out, right? So I would say across like B2B SaaS, about 40% of B2B SaaS companies charge by seat. So it's not I don't think any metric is beyond that, but it's definitely the highest proportion wise. But like maybe and I'm not a person who believes that per seat is dying or that it's bad for all use cases. It makes a lot of sense. But maybe it's like, okay, we need to look at what this should be. So how we would go about that is multi-step. I'll give you the short version. If you want to dig in at any level, you let me know. One thing that we always want, a couple of criteria for what a good price metric looks like. And so again, a price metric could be per API call, per contact in your database, per seat, per gigabyte of data stored, Dropbox or any storage company has. We want to evaluate a price metric through a couple of lenses. So does it scale with the value that customers receive? Does it scale with your costs to serve? And do both sides, the buyer and the seller, is it relatable, and do they feel like they can exert some reasonable control over the metric? Because if it's not enforceable, then that's a real problem. So I want to add to this picture this concept of a value metric. So a value metric is separate than a pricing metric, but a value metric helps you frame what is the customer really trying to achieve by using your product. So the trite answer here is all B2B SaaS can be boiled down from value prop into either it's going to make me money or going to save me money. There's some others, but those are the two ways. And so if we think about, okay, I'm making a CRM or a MarTech platform, this is going to help me make more money. That's the customer's value metric. That's what they're using to judge the success of your product. Usually implicitly, like you have to drag this out of customers and prospects as you talk to them. But effectively, right? If you sell a CRM and it doesn't help them make more money, like it's probably something is going terribly wrong, right? Even if you can fully attribute to that or not. And so we want to understand what the customer's value metric are, and then how does using our product help them achieve that value such that we can tie together this customer-centric view of value with what our product is doing and what it's enforcing. And that we can think of that as like a value chain, a multi-step process that I'll use an example. Again, we'll go use a MarTech platform, helps you and your marketing team send more email campaigns, right? And those email campaigns are now more effective. So you can sell more and they're more effective because we got some fancy AI system that helps you, really understands your customers well. It could A/B test to do all this stuff for you. And so within that is, okay, if they're launching more campaigns, like we could look at, and they're getting more customers, we could look at the size of their database, we could look at the number of campaigns they're launching, right? But none of those are the things that customer really cares about. The customer cares about, like, you got to be more MQLs, and those MQLs translated into pipeline, and the pipeline closed and converted into sales, right? So we have to draw that line to, okay, what are the things we could measure versus what are the customers trying to achieve? And then evaluate each of those against a set of criteria. Is it enforceable? Is it relatable to the customer? This is an area where we may get into AI a little bit more in depth later, but I think a lot of people are really taking a hard turn in the wrong direction by looking at a lot of cost plus pricing as it pertains to like LLM use. As people are building AI-enabled applications that use a foundation model for Anthropic or OpenAI, Google, Gemini, CFOs are seeing a giant monthly bill go out the door every month to those companies, and they're like, "Oh my God, this is now costing us way more to serve than we expected. So we're getting charged by tokens by Anthropic. So we're going to charge our customers their token usage." Well, your customers are not developers. They're not AI experts. They're buying a CRM. And now your salespeople have to explain in real time what a token is and why they should care about it. It's just a losing battle. It's not relatable. Even if you have really persuasive salespeople, which I know a lot of companies do, it's still very difficult to wrap your arms around something that the customer is not already measuring, right? Going back to your original question, Justin, of, what should you do if I'm, entering a market, right? It's the same idea. Like if you're selling a CRM and I say, "Hey, we charge you per seat of the salespeople that are there," it's very relatable. Oh yeah, like the other players in the space already do that, right? It's an easy thing to grok versus like, "Oh, this is new and different." Doesn't necessarily mean it's always the wrong choice if it's not, right? It might be very strong on other characteristics where you have some value proposition where that really aligns well to the differentiated value story you're trying to tell. But usually what you're looking for going through that process is, what is the best of the set of different options that we have? There's rarely one pure best play. And let me just say one more thing, because in the value metric to pricing metric story, I think one thing that folks always try to do is like, well, we're trying to help them increase revenue. Why don't we just help them grow revenue? That's really difficult on something like the enforcement mechanism. Because unless you're in the transaction, I think Stripe has a beautiful business model. They charge, percent of a transaction plus, some additional fee. I haven't looked at the pricing recently, so it may be different, but they're in the transaction, right? They're like, "Hey, we're helping you scale your e-commerce business or whatever. You're using Stripe. So we're going to take a percentage of that revenue." Most companies, they do not have enforceability on that revenue level, and therefore kind of a pure performance or outcome-based model usually is a non-starter, and you have to look at one of these other surrogates.
Getting back to, you said that you think kind of trying to switch to tokens and charge people for their token usage is kind of a hard turn in the wrong direction. Would you then advocate for setting like a limit, like you can use the product up to some limit, but then you just raise your prices on your package and then do some enforcement on how much token usage that package is allowed so that it stays profitable? Or what I guess would you be like the right way to pivot from your price perspective?
So there's a few different approaches that I think are becoming more standard. I think we're still in a area of high experimentation. I would say the way I would frame what we're in right now is very akin to the transition every software company was going through, between 2005 and 2010, trying to wrap their arms around a subscription model and a SaaS model. And so I think there's a lot of learning and iteration going on right now. But what we're seeing is if your capabilities you're adding are enhancing an existing value driver, then what do I mean by that? Let's give you an example. We'll go back to our CRM. I add an AI feature such that a sales rep can come in, look at the account, and summarize all the transaction history and all the conversations that have been had with that customer. Okay. So that's using some tokens, right? But I'm helping that sales rep do the job better that I already sold on, right? That's not a net new value proposition. I'm just making that person more efficient, more effective, right? They're able to give a friendlier touch. I don't know about you, but I hate ever calling into a company. I've been a customer for 20 years, and they're like, feel you have a support ticket that it feels like the first time you've ever talked to them. That's super annoying, right? So I can imagine that inspires a lot of customer loyalty. That increases customer lifetime value, right? It increases brand affinity. There's some other characteristics there. But that said, that's going to cost us more. So how do we want to monetize that? Because remember, customers don't care about your costs. That's not their problem. So if you believe that has differentiated value, then put that in your higher paid tiers to help drive upsell. If you think that's not enough, if you have in your CRM space say for your better plan, it's $9 per user per month. On a net basis, can we raise that plan to $2 or $2 more to $11 per user per month for that plan? Because we're adding that value and just assuming with a distribution of usage that we're going to end up on the net positive. Yeah, we're going to have some heavy users. We're going to have some light users. It really depends upon what you're trying to do with that feature. I think one mistake with tokens is that I was mentioning before, it's symptomatic of a deeper set of problems. So fundamentally, we've got a cost problem. We need to pass that cost problem on to our customers. Again, that's not the customer's problem. That's your problem. So does this feature have differentiated value? Is it actually driving results for customers? Just because you added an AI feature does not mean it has value for your customers. A lot of these AI features I've tried in products, it's like, yeah, it's interesting. It only works about 50% of the time. And now you're going to charge me more for this thing that works 50% of the time. And so in that knee-jerk reaction to, hey, let's make sure our margins don't change because we ship this product. Remember what I said before, anytime you launch a new feature, you always have adoption risk. You always have value creation risk. We put something out, even with the best of research, we don't know that it's actually going to do the thing customers wanted. Maybe the UI is not quite there. Maybe we miss some things, right? Such that customers sort of look at it and don't get it. And we happen all the time. And now you're also going to put a monetization barrier for there. And so we're seeing a lot of companies now retract from that approach because they're realizing that as soon as I put a monetization gate in front of it, that's going to stop my adoption flywheel. And I think we've all got very comfortable over the last 15 years of SaaS saying, hey, we're going to ship stuff and we're going to iterate and we're going to move as like customers. We're going to see where the flaws are. Well, now we're charging for this thing that's not quite half baked. So now we get no usage on it. Now our flywheel is immediately impeded. And so we're seeing companies start to look at this risks trade-off a little bit more deeply and try to see okay, are there things that we can do that maybe are fair limit uses? Most software you use, if it has an API, somewhere in the user agreement documents, it'll say, hey, we don't charge for API usage, but if you start making 1 million requests a second to our servers, we reserve the right to rate limit you because you're not allowed to take down our system for all of our other customers. So maybe you put something in there like that. There's other cost routing options people have. So, Anthropic has Haiku, Sonnet, and Opus. If maybe the first 50 requests or first 100 requests get you routed to Opus. If that salesperson is just hammering our thing all day, every day, maybe we route him down to the Haiku model. He still gets his question answered, but it saves us a bunch of money. And like most of the people in the organization are still getting the promised value. It's just, we can help manage costs on our end. And so, or maybe you put things in sort of in contract language, right? Not in the like technical documentation, right? It's like, is that feature really something you're broadcasting on your pricing page and saying this has value, therefore we're going to charge you money for it? I think that's where companies are really taking a second look at, okay, how far ahead are we? I think the other thing that's going on here is there's a bit of the Red Queen problem. So if you remember your childhood storybook, Alice in Wonderland, the Red Queen is, I run faster and faster to stay in the same place. We're seeing that in spades. I do not envy the foundation model companies. They're out raising hundreds of billions of dollars in capital just to keep the lights on and serve the next model. And they're also incredibly price competitive, right? The models that are out right now versus 2 years ago, if someone gave you the top tier model from 2 years ago and made you use it today, you'd be like, what is this garbage, right? It's amazing how fast our preferences change. And it probably costs you less, like all in, to do that task that it would have done before, right? So the cost is less, the effectiveness is more. I think there was a report from OpenAI. I can't remember exactly what the number was, but they looked at just from a year ago, the same token usage, one model versus another from a year was like 350x better efficiency, like or price. So like that's the level of the price curve that we're talking about.
It's like the new Moore's law.
Yeah. It's So I would say all that to say, plan for continued improvement of these models, plan for this to be a investment period, plan for agility and iteration. I think the companies that are doing the best at this in the AI game have their ears glued to their customers, communities. If you pay attention to Reddits or Twitter, like there was just a price announcement from a company I'll leave nameless, but like I saw it all over my Twitter feed. Maybe I'm getting fed specially because of my proclivities and my recommendation algorithm is tuned to surface all that to me. And then doing really well on communicating and iterating based upon that market feedback versus thinking like, I think we got lulled into a false sense from 2010 to now, thinking like, oh, the subscription model is baked. We just change our pricing once every 5 years when we do something major. And yeah, that wasn't the case. Again, 2005 to 2010, there was a bunch of perpetual software companies who'd be like, what do we do with the SaaS thing? We don't understand. And then we had to figure it out. And then we got lulled into, 10, 15 years of a fixed business model. I think we're in another one of these transition periods. And so I think agility is the name of the game.
I like that. There's so much there you said to unpack, and I have like 6 more questions based on that. But unfortunately, we don't have a lot of time. I do have a few more questions though, and we've worked our way to my next question actually, which is communicating then these pricing changes to your existing customers without damaging their trust. I mean, we kind of you hit on it like around it in several ways, but the decision gets made based on whatever information or analytics that we have. A pricing change is going to occur, again, for whatever reason that might be, good, bad, or indifferent. How do you now communicate that to your customers in such a way as to not damage that trust or make it off-putting?
I would say there's a few different techniques or dimensions here that I would touch on. So one is the communication itself, one is the timing, and one is iteration. So let me talk about iteration. So segmentation isn't just applicable when you're trying to understand customer motivations and needs, but when you're rolling out changes like this, thinking about segmenting your existing customer base and who is at risk and who isn't is really important. So any B2B SaaS company, separate than B2C. So Netflix, I don't know how many millions of customers they have. If they lose any one of them, not going to be material to their business. However, B2B SaaS company, oh no, we lost JP Morgan because of our price change. There goes 20% of our revenue. That's a problem. So maybe you want to put JP Morgan in a special bucket, maybe towards the end. Maybe towards the beginning and the end. Maybe before you make the decision, your product team, maybe your CEO should have a conversation with your JP Morgan person being like, hey, here's what we're thinking about doing. Like, would you cause this to cancel your contract? Right? There's better and worse ways to have that conversation. But usually customers, look, they want you to be long-term successful. We've had a lot of innovation. We're trying to succeed as a business. You like our product? We would like you to continue using our product. We don't want to like go bankrupt and have you find another vendor, right? Having it be aligned is very upfront, right? I think a lot of people are very shy from their personal lives talking about money, but in business, like it's very upfront to talk about money. Like, hey, you've got a business, we've got a business, we've all got to be here together. Do you guys want to write the software? No, it's why you're paying us. Like, we've got to be able to make sure that our business is successful, could be around long term, right? So making sure values are aligned and that you're communicating up front. But then also when you're rolling these changes out, hey, we've got a segment of customers who are highly engaged, high NPS scores, and they don't pay us a lot currently. Like, these are like a ripe target to roll that first set out of changes to, right? Like, hey, you're getting tons of value out of the product. You really love us. We're charging you more. Like, you might hear some pushback, right? But then listen and then tune it for your next group, right? And you're going to slowly sort of move up that risk curve. I've seen companies go to like a 5x5 matrix, right? Where they're looking at like value to the customer, value to us, right? And trying to figure out like how we grow that. But however many levels is tactically unimportant. But the idea is like, you're not doing like a broad sweep at once. The other point is kind of the communication itself. So, hey, Mr. Customer, last year, given our, what we heard from you in QBRs or what we could tell from our product analytics data, we think we helped you generate X million dollars a year in pipeline, or, close this many deals. Over the last, few quarters or few months, we've introduced all XYZ amazing new features. We see that your team is really adopting those, blah, blah, blah. Glad you're getting a lot of value. We're committed to continuing investing in the product, and therefore we need to adjust our pricing to do that. And therefore we're increasing our prices. Here's what our new price is going to be. However, this is optional, but recommended depending upon your case. Because you've been such a loyal customer, Aaron, we want to extend you a 3, 6, 12-month loyalty discount. So your pricing is not changing. For everyone else, it's changing on March 1st. For you, you're going to have the same pricing through March 1st of next year. And then your price will be set at the new list price. After that, the new pricing will apply. P.S. If this causes real hardship for you, please reach out to us. We'd love to speak with you and see if we could make this more amenable to you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's a big part of my day-to-day is handling client communications and things like that, and that is something that comes up periodically. Obviously, is when you have a new service or it becomes an annual sort of a thing, or as you say, you iterate on it. I'm always interested in reaching out to clients and customers and other businesses in a meaningful and healthy way, but keeping everything on the up and up, as you say, talking about money, which is not a strong suit of mine. I'm afraid my wife is far better at that than I am. But
yeah, and there's been some really bad blowups in the last few years. There was a company, Unity, that was, I think their CEO got fired, and then they were on the front page of the New York Times. Reddit changed their API pricing and irritated a bunch of people. All their moderators quit in protest. And if we could draw one through line through a lot of those ones where things go poorly, it's because, one, you don't want to argue with your customers in the public square. There's no way that comes off as anything other than you're stupid and we're smart, and customers don't like it when you say you're stupid and we're smart. So don't do that.
Good note.
And usually it implies that you made a communication error somewhere. Like, this doesn't apply to every example, but I've been on the other side of this. Usually you do have a lot of spreadsheets, on the back end that explain what the changes are and where everyone's going to land. Spreadsheets are really hard to communicate to entire customer base, right? Even if you sent them to them, they probably wouldn't understand them. No, like most people wouldn't even open it up. And so usually what you have is just confusion, and then you get really unsatisfactory answers from a comms team. And so what do you do instead? You say, So hopefully CEO comes out, says, hey, sorry about that. We screwed up. We're going to retract what we said we were going to do, and we'll be back with an update in a month on what our plan is, right? And so because where the you're stupid and we're smart thing goes wrong is that just riles up the crowd. This is particularly pernicious if you're have a customer base that's chronically online. Pissing off all the Reddit moderators, really bad idea. Unity is sells to game developers, so techies who are on these tech forums and Twitter, etc. Really bad community, because as soon as you start arguing with people in forums and trying to explain yourself, it's just going to be a pile-on and it's not going to go well. So just short circuit that. Hey, we screwed up. Sorry about that. Disregard what you said. We'll be back with your update in a month, right? And then you come back, and even if you come back in a month and it's just kind of marginally better, you've not turned a little bonfire into a forest fire in the interim.
Yeah, the Reddit API changes were particularly upsetting because a lot of people had businesses that were built off of Reddit's old API model that were just not feasible after the changes, and they killed a lot of people's small businesses, which I can understand why people were irritated by that.
Yeah.
And Redditors are a vocal group.
What?
Appreciate not wanting to irritate them. Well, I guess in your work consulting and helping people with pricing, what are the things that people most often get wrong? Like if there's one or two mistakes there, or if an 80%, like if you hit 3 things on this checklist, you're probably doing okay. Do you have like a quick answer to something like that?
I would say one, just very tactically, like especially if you're B2B, going back to what I was saying before, like having a discounting policy and enforcing it. This is more the operational side of pricing, but it is also, if it's not enforced, you don't have market signal, right? You're like trying to push on something with a string. It's if your pricing is squishy to the market, think about what that does as it translates back into the business from the market. You have very squishy understanding of where the problems in your pricing are. Even if it's not good today, if you have a policy and are enforcing it or monitoring it, that at least gives you a better sense of the market. Shouldn't be your only one, but it gives you that sense. So I'd say that's one area.
Can you bring that down to the street? Like what does it look like when someone has a discounting policy that's enforced?
Yeah. So I've seen a lot of discount policy theater. Maybe what I call it. So maybe you have a discounting policy that says a sales rep can discount to X before they need approval, then it has to go to their manager, and then they get this approval authority, then it has to go to a VP, and then it has to go to CRO, and then it goes to the CEO and CFO for approval, right? So one question to ask is, of discount escalation requests that get made, what percentage of them are approved? And I see a lot of companies where 100% of them are approved. So what does that mean? It means that you have VPs and directors who are in their email probably getting bombarded, just being like, approve. And why do they have that? It's because you ask them, they're like, hey, I see you have 100% approval on all the discounting. So then why have the policy? Well, because every time I get asked about it, or I say no, or I used to say no. So from that as a tactical perspective, I would say, trying to go through and, does your, what we were talking about before, like, can you say who each of your offers is for? I think is a really helpful exercise. So if I have a good, better, best, like, who is this for, right? Like, can we name that? Or did we just throw a bunch of features together because they were, I don't know, cheap for us to build, and we just thought like, well, we'll just give those away basically because we don't care about those features, right? It's like, no, like that has to solve a customer use case, and that customer looks like they're in some situation. Can we name who each of those are for? And man, I could go on and on. I would say the other thing is just, do you have the right price metric? That's probably one of the highest leverage things. And it can be one of the hardest to pull off. It is definitely not something you want to change repeatedly, probably no more often than, once every 2 or 3 years, I would say at most. But that one can have a really big impact because that allows you to really scale with how much value different customers get in a very repeatable way that hopefully customers understand, and they see the success as well. And maybe they're not happy to pay you, but they understand it.
For sure. I've got one more, and it's actually Justin's favorite question, so I'm going to steal it from him. Sorry for taking the thunder, sir, because we are getting tight on time, and I still have like so many questions for you. But what's something that we did not ask you that we should have, or some bit of information you want to get out there that we did not prod out of you?
Oh man.
And don't say it's enough for a whole nother episode, because that might be true, but it won't make us feel good as interviewers.
If somebody starts saying we're in AI world now, so outcome-based pricing is the way to go, I would stop listening to anything else that person tells you. I'll leave you with that.
There's a soundbite. I love it.
Man, yep, clip that.
Yep. Fire, Dan. I love it. That's amazing.
Awesome. Dan, this has been super fun and really informative, and no kidding. I mean, we could easily do a whole nother episode for real, but thank you so much for sharing your time and your insights and your talents here.
Oh, thank you for having me. I appreciate it. That was fun.
Where can folks connect with you?
Yeah, happy to connect with folks on LinkedIn. Just let me know in the request that you heard me on a podcast so I could separate it from the rest of the LinkedIn spam. And you check out website, producttranquility.com. I also have a podcast called SaaS Scaling Secrets, where I interview scale-up B2B SaaS CEOs. It's not pricing-centric, but all of the other challenges, sometimes including pricing, but, it could be culture, could be management, could be remote, work, et cetera, and scaling companies. So that can be found wherever podcasts are.
Fantastic. We've been talking with Dan Balcauski, founder of Product Tranquility. Special thanks, as always, to our listeners. If you like what you're hearing, have ideas for the show, just want to tell us what's on your mind, hit us up, hit that like button, throw a review our way, subscribe if you are so inclined. Justin, many thanks, my friend. Looking forward to seeing you again next time on SaaS That App. Thanks for cruising along with us on SaaS That App. We hope you grabbed some insights that were inspiring, actionable, or at least entertaining.
If you enjoyed the show, don't forget to subscribe and leave a review.
Until next time, keep building, keep growing, and keep those apps sassy.